I move Amendment 1 in my name and that of my colleague Deputy Canny. Minister, we touched on this at second stage, and I've put down this particular amendment. It's quite a clumsy amendment, but it's the only mechanism that I have available to me to raise this specific discriminatory action being taken by Irish Life Health, which happens to be the only insurance company to take such an approach in relation to public hospitals in this country. And the specific hospitals that I'm talking about are Mallow, James Connolly, Peamount, St Columkills in Loughlinstown, St Joseph's in Raheny, St Luke's in Rathgar, St Michael's in Dunleary, Naas, Lourdes Orthopaedic in Kilkenny, Our Lady's in Manorhamilton, Midwestern Orthopaedic in Limerick, St John's in Limerick, Roscommon University Hospital and South Tipperary General Hospital. And these hospitals, along with the hospices at St Patrick's, Marymount Hospice, Our Lady's Hospice in Blackrock and Our Lady's Hospice in Harold's Cross. Irish Life Health, these are all public hospitals, and Irish Life Health have said that in quite a number of their policies that they will not provide cover in those public hospitals. Now, this is an issue, as I say, that I have brought up on a number of occasions because many of these smaller local hospitals can take pressure off some of our bigger specialist hospitals. As you know, Minister, the policy is to try and move more elective work into these smaller hospitals, taking pressure off the bigger hospitals where they would do more serious acute work. Now, I know you're going to come back, Minister, and you're going to use Sláinte Care as your excuse to justify what Irish Life Health is doing. And I think that's wrong. Because in fairness to your predecessor and the senior minister's predecessor, Minister Simon Harris, when he was the minister in charge, he agreed with me that this was wrong in relation to this discrimination, and it is wrong that these particular hospitals, public hospitals, are being discriminated against. If Irish Life Health doesn't want to cover any public hospital, then I don't have an issue with that. That's its decision if it wants to do that. And I don't have an issue with the Minister for Health or the Aristotle and the officials coming in here and saying, well, look, the Sláinte Care policy is to take private work out of public hospitals, if that's going to happen across the board. But I'm not going to accept a situation here where we have one insurer that is saying that a select number of hospitals are going to be discriminated against in relation to health insurance. And remember that the whole idea behind the legislation that we're dealing with here is about equity of access. And yet, in relation to one element of equity of access, that is not being provided. And we have people who are paying private health insurance who are being told at the moment, if they want to get care in a public hospital, they have to run the gauntlet of going through accident and emergency departments. Whereas the policy should be, and is supposed to be, that we should be actively encouraging people to go to minor injury units, to go to their local GP, to be referred and treated in their local hospital where possible. But if you happen to live in Blanchardstown, or live in Roscommon, or live in Kildare, or live in North Cork, or live in Limerick, or South Tipperary, and you happen to have private health insurance, and if you're unfortunate enough to have private health insurance with Irish Life Health, and the policy doesn't cover those hospitals, your GP won't refer you to your local hospital. And that's wrong. And that shouldn't be allowed. And I have to say I was deeply disappointed with the parliamentary reply that I received from Minister Donnelly in September of this year, using Sláinte Care as the justification for this. This action and policy that has been taken by Irish Life Health has been taken prior to the adoption of the Sláinte Care report. It is wrong that smaller hospitals are being discriminated against by one insurer. And it's either hold duck or no dinner, Minister. It's either no coverage of any public hospital or every public hospital is treated the same. It's either one or the other. And the funny thing about this is that it seems to be some Model 2 hospitals are included, some Model 2 hospitals are excluded. Some Model 3 hospitals are included, some Model 3 hospitals are actually excluded. So where is the justification for this? The one thing that it does do, though, is force people who want to support their own local hospital. It's forcing them to go to the regional hospitals. In some cases, the regional hospitals with some of the longest waiting times in emergency departments in the country, which is wrong. So I'm asking, Minister, that, you know, instead of kicking this can down the road, that a decisive decision will be taken by the Department of Health in relation to Irish Life Health and say either do one or the other. That's all I'm asking. Treat everyone equally. You're bringing in legislation here that is to treat everyone, regardless of age, regardless of health, equally. But yet, we have one insurer in this country who is discriminating against people purely on their address and undermining some of our local hospitals around the country, and that should not be tolerated, it should not be accepted. And what I have done is said that until Irish Life Health do what every other insurer does, they shouldn't benefit financially from this particular piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy, for your contribution to yesterday's debate, which highlighted the role that Model 2 hospitals can play in providing care to the community. I must, however, reject the amendment and will now outline the reasons for the rejection. The provisions being introduced in this bill in relation to high-cost claims are the result of significant work carried out by the Health Insurance Authority in the last few years. The Authority provided its recommendations to the Minister for Health in June of this year, and as a result, we have the definition in the bill which excludes drugs not approved by the HSE and takes into account other credits claimed from the fund. To include the Deputy's amendment would introduce additional requirements for high-cost claims credits which have not been planned and have not been factored into the Authority's recommendations for other credits or for the stamp duty. I will note also that the coverage of Model 2 hospitals was not raised in the public consultation on the new scheme which was conducted in January of this year. The proposed amendments raises a number of concerns. Firstly, the legal consequences of a change in the Act which would effectively compel insurers to change their existing cover of hospitals, and this would lead to an increase in premiums for consumers. Additionally, this would be an additional element for the new scheme, which has not been notified to the European Commission, which could have knock-on effects on the negotiation process. The scheme was notified to the Commission in July and does not include this requirement that Model 2 hospitals have to be covered for high-cost claims credits to be paid out. Amending the Act to include cover for all Model 2 hospitals would be introducing a particular favoured category of public hospital, which is not appropriate for the Health Insurance Acts. Model 2 hospitals are intended to have a role in providing a medical assessment unit and local injuries unit, as well as elective care. It is intended under Sláinte Care that there will be no private activity at all in public hospitals, which includes Model 2 hospitals. But in answer to the Deputy's concerns raised yesterday, it is not intended that Model 2 hospitals will be used as a testing ground for this policy. It will apply to the whole public hospital system, not just Model 2. Department of Health officials have also surveyed the insurers and have confirmed that the majority of plans across all insurers do provide cover for Model 2 hospitals, the majority of plans. The plans that don't are entry-level plans, which still provide cover for some Model 2 hospitals. These entry-level plans are intended for first-time entrants into the market at an affordable rate. Forcing cover for all Model 2 hospitals would have the unintended impact of driving up the price of entry-level plans. These are plans that are very unlikely to lead to high-cost claims, which are to be covered by the definition which the Deputy is trying to amend. It is very important that people who want to buy health insurance are clear on what they are buying, and health insurers generally issue suitability statements to make sure the customer is aware of where they're covered and that they're buying the right level of cover for the individual person. Applying this amendment to the Act would be counterproductive, and it is in direct contravention to Sláintecare, the aim of ultimately removing private care from public hospitals. Public health policy recognises and is committed to securing and developing the role of smaller hospitals, but this amendment, Deputy, would not future this aim.
Minister, I made it very clear at the start of my contribution that this was a clumsy amendment. But as you know, that if I actually tried to word an amendment in relation to it, it would cause a cost on the Exchequer and would be ruled out of order. So, and the second thing is, it's a bit disingenuous to talk about the public consultation, because the officials here have known for years in relation to this issue. Now, this isn't the first time that I've raised this issue. I've been consistently raising this issue every single December for quite a number of years now at this stage. So it's not that this has come as any surprise to anyone whatsoever, because it hasn't come as a surprise to anyone in relation to it. Now, look, I know that the decision, government has taken the decision, it's not going to accept this amendment, but it is discriminatory. It is wrong. And, you know, I've given you the example last night, Minister, in terms of the oral commitments that are being given in relation to our smaller hospitals. Talk is cheap. And I've given you an example that, you know, if the government was serious about supporting the Model 2 hospitals, why have we got a situation, not just me that's saying this, your own colleague, the Oireachtas, Minister Feehan, is saying this, that it's wrong that we don't have the basic sterilisation facilities at Roscommon University Hospital, where we could actually expand the number of patients that we care for and treat in that hospital through day procedures. And now, on the other side of that coin, when we're asking government to actually protect the Model 2 hospitals and some of the Model 3 hospitals, which are being discriminated against by one insurer on a number of policies, the government isn't prepared to intervene in relation to that. And I think, look, Minister, and I'm not going to dwell on this because I know there's other legislation that's coming in here, but let me say this, I think it sends out a clear message to people around this country in terms of the approach of the health system to the smaller hospitals around our country, that the health system is prepared to turn its back on them when it comes to discrimination in relation to health policies that are discriminating against people based on geography, when we have all of the pontificating here from ministers down through the years since this risk equalisation legislation was first proposed about not ensuring that there would be discrimination based on age or based on illness. But we're quite happy to have discrimination based on geography. And while we say that we support the smaller hospitals across the country, when it comes to putting the law into the polka, the health system isn't prepared to do that. When we're waiting 3 years for additional information regarding an ongoing review to be completed and a decision made on the capital investment to put in to an empty room where the room is already built, and yet we cannot get the equipment to provide the sterilisation facilities so that we can actually treat more people in the public hospitals rather than going through the National Treatment Purchase Fund, where bizarrely some of the same doctors are actually carrying out the procedures in private hospitals. I'll leave it to you, Minister.
Gaurav Mahagud, Deputy, force and cover for all Model 2 hospitals would have unintended consequences. It would drive up the price of entry-level plans. And I would like to make it clear again that a high-cost claim under this bill will arise when a customer's health insurance claim or claims exceeds €50,000 in a 12-month period. The fund will then pay 40% of the portion of the claim that exceeds that amount. So for a claim of €60,000, the fund would pay out €4,000. The types of activities that are conducted in Model 2 hospitals are less likely to result in these high-cost claims, as typically they are of lower complexity and do not result in long-term stays. In the circumstances where a patient was being treated for such a long time on a private basis that it results in a high-cost claim, they would be a patient that was covered by their health insurance for that hospital. And it is very important that people who want to buy health insurance or who do have health insurance, we know there's 46% in the country, they need to be clear on what they are buying and what they are covered for. And health insurers generally issue statements to make sure that the customer is aware of what they have. So unfortunately, I won't be in a position to accept the amendment, Deputy.
Just finally, Minister, to say that, to come in here and say that the reason why you're not prepared to support the principle of what I'm talking about is because including smaller hospitals on health insurance plans would end up having health insurance policies costing more. Now, Minister, with all due respect, that's a load of rubbish. Because, as I have said, this year, last year, the year before that, we're talking about an insurer, not the insurance industry. One single insurer has selected a number of policies that they, or a number of hospitals that they won't cover. So what would happen if that insurer decided that they were only going to cover policies in the City of Dublin? Would the government then intervene if it was only Dublin hospitals that were covered? But it's okay to discriminate against some geographic regions. And as I say, we're talking about one insurer. So it's funny how every other insurer can compete in the market without excluding smaller public hospitals. And yet one insurer, you're saying, would lead to an increase in the cost of their policies if they were to do so. Look, Minister, as I say, the government has made their position quite clear in relation to its approach to the smaller hospitals, so I'm pressing the amendment.
Deputy, I'd just like to say, repeat what I've said already. To introduce or to include your amendment would introduce additional requirements for high-cost claims credit which have not been planned, which I've just addressed. Secondly, and I'm saying this for the third time, forcing cover for all Model 2 hospitals would have the unintended impact of driving up the price of entry-level plans. You haven't addressed that at all. It will force up the price of entry-level plans. And thirdly, amending the Act to include cover for all Model 2 hospitals would be introducing a particular favoured category of public hospital, which is not appropriate for the Health Insurance Acts. They are the facts.
Minister, maybe you're not prepared to listen to me. I've actually addressed those points. I've made those points to you. It is not the case, because, as I have pointed out to you, Minister, all the other insurers cover those hospitals. So how can it increase the cost if a number of hospitals with one insurer are included when every other insurer is prepared to do it? We're talking about a level playing field here. That's all I'm looking for. And the principle of this particular legislation is that it should be a level playing field. And we're saying that in terms of age, in terms of illness, that it must be a level playing field. But we're saying in relation to one insurer that wants to geographically discriminate against people, that no, that's okay. that's allowed. That's the point I'm making here. I'm looking to have equitable treatment right across the board, and the issue is with Irish Life Health. There isn't an issue with the other insurers. So if the other insurers can do it cost effectively, how come Irish Life Health can't do it? And you're saying that you cannot and will not intervene because it will push up the cost of policies.
Mary Lou MacDonald.
Thank you. Just for the purposes of clarity, because the Minister has said repeatedly that the effect of the Deputy's amendment would be to force up cover costs. Could she set out precisely how that is the case? Because I'm unclear, and I've listened to the exchange, and I'm unclear as to how or why that claim is being made by the Minister.
Just to respond to yourself, Deputy, first, the Department of Health officials have surveyed the insurers and have confirmed that the majority of plans across all insurers do provide cover for Model 2 hospitals. The plans that don't are entry-level plans, which still provide cover for some Model 2 hospitals. The entry-level plans are intended for the first-time entrants into the market at an affordable rate. And in answer to yourself, Deputy MacDonald, as I said, to include the Deputy's amendment would introduce additional requirements for high-cost claims credits which have not been planned and have not been factored into the authority's recommendations for other credits or for the stamp duty. The proposed amendment raised a number of concerns. Firstly, the legal consequence of a change in the Act, which would effectively compel insurers to change their existing cover of hospitals, and this would lead to an increase in premiums for consumers. Additionally, there would be an additional element for the new scheme, which has not been notified to the European Commission, which could have knock-on effects on the negotiation process. The scheme was notified to the Commission in July and does not include this requirement that Model 2 hospitals have to be covered for high-cost claims credit to be paid out. In most instances, high-cost claims don't occur in Level 2 hospitals because they're mostly in relation, as I spoke last night, they're mostly in relation for maybe people who would have cancer, who would be a long time in the hospital, and the claims exceed €50,000.